On the white sandy beaches of St. Thomas sits a 70-acre island called Little St. James. For Jeffrey Epstein, it was a zen-like retreat. For others, it was a horror show. Now, Jeffrey had purchased the island for $8 million in 1998, and he built a movie theater, a library, a Japanese bathhouse, and it was here that Jeffrey would entertain the elite: Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, Stephen Hawking, just to name a few. And while the VIPs stayed on the island, Epstein would always lure in a steady stream of underage girls, all shuttled on the Lolita Express. The story of Jeffrey Epstein is one of the most misunderstood of our time. Between the conspiracies and the truth, we have questions. How did he get his money? How did he have such a powerful network? And how did he get away with it for so long? This video is an attempt at answering those questions, a deep dive into one of the most twisted people of our time. Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1953. Growing up, he had been an outstanding high school student, smart enough to graduate 2 years early. And although he would attend NYU, he would never graduate. So in the summer of '74, he began working as a teacher of mathematics at the Dalton School, which is considered one of the best private schools in the United States. Now, some of his students recall him for being famous for an easy A. Others say that he looked like a pimp. He would be walking down the hall with his floor-length fur coat. The connections that Jeffrey made at Dalton would set him up for his life. At a parent-teacher conference, he would meet the head honcho of Bear Stearns, the CEO himself, Ace Greenberg. Now, Ace saw a mirror image of himself within Jeffrey, who had a serious case of PSD. Now, Bear Stearns was one of the most respected trading houses on Wall Street until they collapsed in 2008. But after one interview at Bear Stearns, Jeffrey was hired on the spot, despite his own admission that he didn't know the difference between a stock or a bond.
Started Bear Stearns in 1976. Bear Stearns never had a training program. Alan Greenberg said he wanted me to learn each area of the business.
Now, by his 25th birthday, he was made a limited partner of the firm, which is absolutely insane. He had a stable of ultra-wealthy clients, and he had just purchased a townhome in the Upper East Side in Manhattan. Jeffrey had made it until one day HR calls Epstein into a meeting. That's not a good feeling. Now, they had discovered that he had lied on his resume. He had never completed his degree. When word of this reached the CEO, the man who had hired him, Ace Greenberg, he found himself in a bit of a pickle because Jeffrey was hooking up with the secretary. But that's not even the worst part. Jeffrey was also under investigation from the SEC for insider trading. Now, with all of this happening, he would hand in his resignation, take his $100,000 bonus, and head on home. It was now time for Jeffrey Epstein to take on the world by himself, with no rules or regulations to hold him back. Now, arguably one of the most important characters in this story and the reason for Jeffrey's wealth is Leslie Wexner, aka the definition of the American dream. Leslie had started out from a small clothing shop called The Limited to then owning Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, and Abercrombie & Fitch. By the 1990s, Wexner was a billionaire. Now, a friend had asked Wexner to meet a brilliant young financier that could help him out with his finances: Jeffrey Epstein. And from the first meeting, Epstein and Wexner hit it off. They were just two boys from Brooklyn who came from nothing and now had everything. The two would be virtually inseparable. Now, during his time as Wexner's financial guru, Epstein's personal wealth grew, earning more than $400 million from him. Now, how did Jeffrey get that kind of money? You see, Wexner had signed a power of attorney over his $4.8 billion estate and gave complete control to Jeffrey Epstein. He could purchase real estate, cut checks, and even take out loans in Wexner's name. Jeffrey even transferred Wexner's New York mansion to himself for $0. The infamous Epstein mansion that is valued today at $78 million. Epstein got for free. Now, Wexner thought Epstein was a money manager who knew better than him and knew what he was doing, and that signing this power of attorney, that's just what you do. And for the next 16 years, that one document gave Jeffrey unmatched authority over his entire estate. Now, Leslie didn't just give him money, he also gave him credibility. Jeffrey now claimed to be associated with Victoria's Secret because that's a company Wexner owned. It's even reported that Jeffrey had a say in which models appeared in the Victoria's Secret catalog, fashion shows, and the calendars. Now, Jeffrey would turn his New York mansion into an address known throughout the city where aspiring models could find their break. But no model ever found their break there. I can't go into the graphic details, but Jeffrey would abuse girls thinking that they were gonna get casted, a casting couch. All in all, Wexner became Epstein's one-way ticket to that billionaire lifestyle.
So how does it all look? Is my hair good? It's all good. All right, we're rolling?
Now, Ghislaine Maxwell was born into fame and fortune. So to understand her role in Epstein's life, we need to look at her father, Robert Maxwell. See, he was a man that went from a poor refugee to becoming a billionaire media mogul with newspapers all around the globe. and out of all of his children, Ghislaine was his favorite. Throughout her teenage years, Ghislaine would join her father in the high society party circuit, where they would meet the royal family, the Kennedys, the Clintons. She was known as the social butterfly. Now, by the time Ghislaine went to Oxford University, her father forbid her from bringing home any boyfriends. See, Robert viewed any man near his daughter as a threat to the Maxwell family fortune. So Ghislaine would have to remain daddy's little girl forever. Until November 5th, 1991. Robert Maxwell disappeared off of his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. Yes, he named his $10 million yacht after his daughter. Now, officials said that he had died of a heart attack while taking a whiz off at the side of his yacht and accidentally fell off. Now, after his death, Robert's secrets would start to come to the surface. He had stolen over $400 million from pension funds of the newspapers he owned around the world, all to prop up his crumbling publishing empire. Now, the fallout from Robert Maxwell's death left the family reputation in tatters and bankrupt. So to start a new clean slate for herself, Ghislaine moved from London to New York to create a new life. The diamonds, the yachts, the servants she all grew up with were gone, and she would do dang near anything to get that back. Arriving in the Big Apple after the death of her father, Jeffery and Ghislaine would meet at a cocktail party for the Daily Mirror. He had introduced himself to her as an international man of mystery, and for Ghislaine, it was everything she wanted: money. Simply that. And the two would start a romantic relationship, and while they dated for a bit, they would just become platonic friends. Best friends, as Jeffery said in a 2003 Vanity Fair article. Ghislaine would replace the role of her controlling father with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the motivations for her friendship with Epstein still remain a big debate. Did she want to marry him? Was it all an act? Was it just two grifters trying to outgrift each other? Who knows? But what is known is that Ghislaine introduced Epstein to the elite in society, the elite that she grew up with. Now, reports of her recruiting girls for Epstein's scheme are alleged to have started in 1994, and from there, she would work with them to recruit, groom, and ultimately abuse countless victims. Now, this next part is hard for me to talk about because I want to come off as apolitical as possible. This is not a story about the left or the right, it's about people in power. Ghislaine Maxwell saw Donald Trump as a vital connection at the time for Jeffrey Epstein. She had had a terrific connection through him through her father, Robert Maxwell. Now, Donald and Robert Maxwell had partied together on the Lady Ghislaine, attended soirees, and even did some business together. They were quite fond of each other. But in the 1990s, Trump needed friends. He had just gone belly up on his Atlantic City project, and Ghislaine and Epstein would bring Trump along in a never-ending series of parties and feasts with the high society, and Trump would fit right in. At one exclusive party in 1992 held at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, 28 supermodels had been flown in for a Calendar Girls competition, until the organizer of the event was shocked to learn that the only people in attendance were Trump and Epstein. Now, Donald Trump would recall Epstein as a terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. We all have heard that quote. But in 2004, after a friendship of roughly 17 years, Trump and Epstein would have a falling out. You see, Epstein was trying to purchase a mansion in Palm Beach, the House of Friendship. But before the sale was finalized, Epstein was horrified to see that Trump, who was still underwater from his bankruptcy, outbid him with an offer for more than $41 million. From then on, the two men never spoke again. After entering politics, Trump would say,
"Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan."
This is hard to take seriously. There are flight logs of them flying on each other's private planes. There are dozens of photos of them partying together throughout the 90s. And Epstein's Black Book has more than 14 phone numbers for Trump. They knew each other. As more and more women start to come forward to describe Jeffrey's assaults, 26 years ago, Maria Farmer was a starving artist who had entered the life of Epstein at an art show in New York City. Jeffrey had asked Marie to become a receptionist at his mansion in New York, where, unrelated, Bill Cosby lives across the street. Unrelated, though. So she accepted the job, and her first task was logging the visitors in and out of the home. Now, Maria noted around this time, there was always a stream of young girls who came in wearing school uniforms. So in an effort to explain this oddity, Ghislaine told Maria that Epstein, he was a recruiter for Victoria's Secret, and that these girls were aspiring runway models. And it wasn't just girls that came by. Maria also noted that men would visit the home. Harvard law professor and reoccurring character in the story, Alan Dershowitz, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton. Now, Maria Farmer's story is linked below. I'm not going to get into the details because it is quite graphic, but she was abused at the hands of Epstein at his New Mexico ranch. Now, Maria is believed to be the first victim to report Epstein to the police. Now, within months of that report being filed, Jeffrey, possibly in an effort to create a more secluded environment away from prying eyes, would purchase a 70-acre private island, Little St. James. And on his own island, Jeffrey could be king. There are dozens of lawsuits against Epstein, and one of the most credible and important survivors to the saga is the story of Virginia Roberts. Ghislaine Maxwell had spotted Virginia, a 16-year-old working at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, and Maxwell asked her to audition for a job as Epstein's traveling masseuse. And it was during that first audition massage that Epstein made his intentions clear. But when the encounter ended, she was paid $200. And over the course of 2 years, she would become a full-time employee for Epstein. By late 2001, Jeffrey was doubling down on the abuse. Virginia Roberts was now ordered to entertain other men, and one of the first men was Alan Dershowitz. For those that don't know, Alan Dershowitz was Donald Trump's defense attorney when he was getting impeached. Now, she says that she had 6 companion times with Alan Dershowitz. First one took place when she was 16, and the last one when she was 19. Alan denies all of this. He even filed a defamation suit against the Netflix documentary and says Virginia just made the whole thing up.
She's lied.
But she wasn't lying about being abused by Jeffrey Epstein as a minor, correct?
That is between her and Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, now this part I find funny. So there was so much hard evidence of Alan being at Epstein's mansion that he actually admitted to one massage at Epstein's house.
Dershowitz did say he once received a massage at Epstein's mansion, but from an adult woman.
I kept my underwear on during the massage. I don't like massages particularly.
And some of the other men Virginia entertained, Matt Groening, the Simpsons creator.
Matt Groening was the most disgusting man I have ever had to be with because of his feet and his stench. I could have taken a grinder to his toenails and it wouldn't have cut them.
Now, we all know about Jeffrey's private plane. You see, Jeffrey never flew commercial. He had a helicopter, a black Gulfstream jet, a twin-engine Cessna 421, and the crown jewel of the fleet was a Boeing 727, known as the Lolita Express. Now, during a trip to London on the Lolita Express, Ghislaine told Virginia that she'd be meeting a prince that day, and that he was to receive whatever he wanted. So upon introduction, Ghislaine asked Prince Andrew to guess how old she is. Andrew said 17. And Epstein smiled back and said she'll be too old soon, she's 16. Which is the age of consent in the UK. Now, the 4 with Prince Andrew's royal security would go out to the club, and near the end, Virginia knew what she had to do that night. But before that, she asked for one thing in return. She wanted a photo with Prince Andrew. So Jeffrey would snap the shot and told the two to have fun. This is that photo from that night. I'm not going into the details, but once the prince finished, the prince left. And years later, Andrew denied ever meeting Virginia, even though there's like a photo of them together.
She says she met you in 2001. She dined with you. She danced with you. You bought her drinks. You were in Tramp nightclub in London. And she went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Didn't happen. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story. One of which is that I don't know where the bar is in Tramps.
You see, he said that he went out for pizza with his daughters and got home by 7.
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
She provided a photo of the
Yes.
two of you together.
Yes,
Your arm was around her waist.
yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't.
You think it is you next to her in the photo?
Oh, it's definitely me. I mean, that's a picture of me. It's not a picture of. I don't believe it's a picture of me in London, because when I go out in London, I wear a suit and a tie.
Now, how was the prince hanging out with the sketchy couple? One journalist wrote, I think summed it up well. Andrew was so innocent and naive that he probably didn't realize he was being used for his name and access to potential investors. In 1993, Jeffery and Ghislaine first met Bill Clinton when they visited the White House for a donor event, as seen in these photos here. And after Clinton got out of office, he would establish the Clinton Global Initiative, his big nonprofit, and Epstein would write them a $4 million check to help get them started. One reporter wrote, "What attracted Clinton to Epstein was simple. He had money and he had a plane." Now the two, just like Trump, were good friends. Jeffrey's black book had over 20 numbers for Bill, and Clinton flew at least 26 times on Mr. Epstein's plane. Now here's what's interesting. Epstein had 3 pilots, and only one of them kept record of the passengers. So that's the only log in existence. It really makes you think about who else went on those flights. Now for all the conspiracies over Bill Clinton, trust me, I'm not a fan of the guy at all. Virginia Roberts, our most credible witness, says she never saw Bill Clinton have any companion time. But she says she did see him on the island with 2 other girls, and that it would have been hard to overlook the sketchy parts of Epstein. You know, the adult-themed items strewn throughout the house, his creepy painting of him in a blue dress. How could you not ignore that? Now, in a 2002 interview, Bill Clinton would describe Jeffrey as a committed philanthropist and appreciated his insights during the recent trip to Africa. Now, this trip to Africa was with Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, and Bill Clinton, and this was all on Jeffrey's private plane. Now, Sean T. Davis, another victim of Epstein, who can be seen in these photos massaging Bill Clinton's neck, was also on that Africa trip. Now, at first glance, these photos look creepy, but Davis, the girl in the photo, she was 22 years old at the time. Now, I looked into everything about this. She just states that it was simply a neck massage. Quote, "President Clinton was a perfect gentleman during the trip, and I absolutely saw no foul play involving him." Now, in his later years, Clinton would put out a statement, about his relationship with Jeffrey, admitting that he did take those 4 trips on his private plane, and he met with them in his home in New York, though he says he never met on the island. But there's a lot of contradictory eyewitness reports against that. Now, do I think Bill Clinton did some sketchy stuff? Hell yeah. Is there any hard evidence to prove that? No. Now, by the time Jeffrey was turning 50, he was going through a bit of a midlife crisis. You see, he was having the realization that he'd probably never have kids, and that he would have no legacy to leave behind. So he made a deal with Virginia. He would give her a mansion and a monthly stipend if she was going to bear his child. And upon birth, she was to sign away all of the parental rights to Ghislaine and Jeffrey. For Virginia, this was a smack on the face, and she realized she needed to get out of this. So 6 months later, she was sent to Thailand, and while there, she fell in love at first sight with an Australian Muay Thai fighter. They married 7 days later, and she called Jeffrey that week and told him she would not be coming back. She moved to Australia, and she hoped to never hear from Jeffrey Epstein ever again. Now, even if Jeffrey couldn't have a kid with Virginia, he could still maybe call some of his friends, who owed him some favors. You see, Jeffrey was a patron of the sciences, donated millions to universities and research. Now, with Jeffrey wanting children, he would help launch the Harvard Program for Evolutionary Dynamics with a $6.5 million donation. Now, the goal of this was to extract the best genes for gene pool research. Now, this was revealed in the New York Times. This is not a conspiracy. Epstein wanted to use this perfect DNA to impregnate 20 women at his New Mexico ranch, or what he called his baby farm. He even built a dorm and an underground hospital for the births. What we are talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, is eugenics. Now, once Epstein's Harvard donation was revealed in 2019, Harvard would shut down the center. Now, though the baby farm never came to reality, the scientists he hung out with were some pretty big players. He had Nobel Prize-winning physicist Murray Mann, Oliver Sacks, who's like a best-selling author, and of course, Stephen Hawking. And I'm only scratching the surface. Most of these scientists just stuck around Jeffrey because of the money. They would keep their mouths shut, and they just opened up their wallets. 2 female students were scrapping at the local high school. When teachers broke up the fight, they found $300 in cash on one of the girls. Suspecting maybe she was selling illegal substances, her parents were contacted to explain where did the money come from, and the girl immediately broke down and said that a man had been paying her for massages. Now, when the school called Palm Beach PD, they knew exactly who they were talking about. Jeffrey Epstein. You see, Jeffrey was known to the department. He had just donated a $90,000 firearms training simulator the year before, and had even coordinated with them for the security of Prince Andrew when he was in town. So if these allegations were true, Jeffrey had played the police department. Investigators put the house under surveillance and discovered that the entire staff at his mansion was to solely serve the purpose of his trafficking operation. Chauffeurs were hired to drive the girls home. Chefs were on hand to feed them when they were hungry, and even one worker brought bouquets of roses to the high school plays. Now, the detectives had even sifted through Epstein's garbage, and they'd found some very incriminating evidence. The phone numbers of high school girls, feminine hygiene products, adult toys, books like Slavecraft, The Roadmap to Servitude, and most importantly, one of the girls' high school report card. Palm Beach PD executed a search warrant at El Brillo Way, and within hours, detectives were carting off massage tables, boxes of photographs, and computers. Jeffery was pretty upfront about the allegations against him, so in one email with Palm Beach PD from his attorney, he said, "Mr. Epstein is very passionate about massages. The massages are therapeutic and spiritually sound for him. That is why he's had so many massages. He even donated $100,000 to Ballet Florida purely so the dancers could have massages." Now, he knew an indictment was headed his way, so Jeffery would lawyer up with the lead attorney by none other than a reoccurring character and now victimizer, Alan Dershowitz. On July 23, 2006, the grand jury returns an indictment for one count of solicitation of a minor for prostitution. Jeffery was picked up by police, and just 2 hours later, he was back on the street after posting his bond of $3,000, which is absolutely insane. Now, at this point, the chief of police felt that they had really abandoned the victims, allowing Epstein to walk the street again when there were dozens of victims. So he would bring the case to the FBI, Operation Leap Year. So feeling the heat, Alan Dershowitz decided to up the ante and bring on another star attorney to disrupt the now federal investigation, Kenneth Starr, aka the attorney that uncovered the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal. Fucking ironic. The courtroom testimony from any of these girls should have been enough to send Epstein to prison for life. This wasn't the type of case that is plea bargained, yet it would be. And why is that? So the prosecutor, Alex Acosta, and Epstein's attorney, Alan Dershowitz, also mind you, are two Harvard alumni, would work together on a sweetheart deal. Something that is almost unheard of for a case like this. So with the endless back and forth, Epstein would plead guilty on June 30th, 2008 to one count of procuring.
Jeffrey Epstein went to jail just before 10 this morning. He pleaded guilty in open court.
So Epstein would serve 18 months in county lockup, and here's one part of the deal that was quite interesting. It stated that all named and unnamed co-conspirators are granted immunity from future state and federal charges. Ghislaine Maxwell was granted immunity. From the outside, why did Alex Acosta agree to this? You see, he said that the case was uncertain, and by forcing Epstein to sign the plea deal, they could now guarantee a sentence.
Based on the evidence, there was value to getting a guilty plea and having him register.
Now, Alex would backtrack this claim in 2019 and say, "Actually, I received instructions from the higher-ups in Washington because Epstein belonged to intelligence. It was above my pay grade." Epstein should have had multiple counts with the 30 victims involved and decades in prison.
The guilty plea and deal end a years-long process that could have sent Epstein to jail for 15 years.
Yet, he would get out within a year. Behind bars at the Palm Beach jail, nothing was normal about his stay. For a man who had everything under control, now he had nothing. So like anyone in jail, he was allowed to apply for a work release, and instantly, he was approved.
Are you released from jail at some time? Do you have to report back to jail on a daily basis?
Yes, I report back to jail at 8 p.m.
Every single day?
Yes, sir.
And is it 7 days a week that you're out on work release?
No, sir.
How many days a week are you out on work release?
6.
And of those 6 days, how many hours per day are you out on work release?
12.
Now, Epstein's morning would begin when his driver and bodyguard, a Russian MMA fighter, picked him up from the jail and drove him to his office, home of the Florida Science Foundation, a non-profit that he had conveniently created months before. And he wouldn't be in jail for too long. With his good behavior, he was released 5 months early.
Typically, when released, the former inmates are able to walk free across this bridge to a parking lot below, but not Epstein. He was able to exit from an area below, an area where a vehicle was waiting for him, we're told, for his security and privacy.
And even with this probation being set for a year, he would just continue to live as if nothing happened. Except now Jeffrey was a level 3 offender and had to register everywhere he lived every month. When Jeffrey was released, Ghislaine Maxwell was removed from his life. She started to date Ted Waite, the founder of Gateway Computers. She was moving on from her past, and she wouldn't see Epstein again. Jeffrey's walking bank, Leslie Wexner, he had also followed Ghislaine out the door, cutting all ties with him. And while Ghislaine wasn't on Epstein's side anymore, she would continue to social climb. She would watch Chelsea Clinton walk down the aisle at her wedding in 2010. She would attend the Met Gala and fashion shows, and at one Vanity Fair party in 2014, this is where that famous photo of her and Elon Musk comes from. Elon says that she photobombed me. Regardless of where she went though, she could not escape her past with Epstein. You would think that his network of the wealthy and powerful would just leave him after his conviction. His crimes were public record. People like him are looked at in disgust in our society. However, he was able to get back into his old routines, not just with the young girls, but with his network of the elite. Now, he was able to revamp his whole public image through the help of Peggy Segal, one of the most powerful publicists in New York City. So to repair his reputation, Jeffrey would launder his influence through successful academics and celebrities. She would invite him out to parties where they would mingle with Chelsea Handler, Charlie Rose, Rudy Giuliani, and Chris Cuomo.
My name is Chris Cuomo.
His home in Manhattan resumed its status as a place for the rich and famous. Now, under the advice of his new publicist, in 2011, Epstein would bankroll and attend billionaire dinners with the big titans of tech. And according to the New York Times, when Epstein stopped donating money in 2016 to the billionaire dinners, it just stopped them altogether. Now let's talk about Bill Gates real quick. Since the Gates-Epstein connection has really come to light, Bill's story keeps on changing. First, it was philanthropy.
You know, I had several dinners with him, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health through contacts that he had.
Then it was lifestyle intrigue. Then it was escaping a failing marriage. And now he says he's pursuing a Nobel Prize. But let's just play devil's advocate and assume that he's telling the truth. Suppose that Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, needed the help of a registered offender to win a Nobel Prize. Should he fly on his jet, take dozens of personal meetings, visit him multiple times and stay late into the night at his mansion, and even donate money to where Epstein directed him to? To me, it adds up to one thing. Gates is an unreliable narrator, and he's playing the PR move to see which excuse is going to gain him the most sympathy. But after this interview recently...
Well, he's dead, so, in general, you always have to be careful.
Yeah, I think that's all out the door. The last few years of Jeffrey's life were a cascade of legal cases, but he didn't let that get in the way of him getting his girls. Now, rather than having his assistants troll local high schools, he started importing his playmates from Russia. And the man bringing these women over was Peter Listman, who owned a Russian modeling agency that was connected to getting young girls for the Russian oligarchy.
Please, come back to me next week when I take Paul Servina's advice and look for working girl in Hollywood.
Essentially, it was a state-run operation for trafficking women that Jeffrey was connected with. However, a new problem would be on the horizon for Jeffrey. Donald Trump was elected president. But Trump's presidency was a curse for Epstein. It wouldn't be too long before photos of the two started going around, and even video footage as well. And 1 month after being sworn into office, Trump would nominate Alex Acosta, the attorney that gave Epstein that sweetheart deal.
The nominee for Secretary of the Department of Labor will be Mr. Alex Acosta,
to the position of Secretary of Labor. And while the Senate would confirm his pick, behind closed doors, investigative reporters at the Miami Herald began to take a closer look. And they would soon reveal his role in that 2007 plea deal that Epstein got. By 2019, with the height of the Me Too movement, a court ruled that Alex Acosta had illegally hid that plea deal from the victims. And under all of the public pressure with members of Congress, both sides, the Justice Department announced that Epstein's 2007 case was going to be reinvestigated. Now, old Jeffrey was feeling the heat this time, so he would relocate to his $8 million mansion in Paris, which is far away from prying eyes. Now, why France, you might say? Let's just say that the legal age of consent is 15 there. He couldn't be extradited. He could pull a Roman Polanski.
Talk about you and little girls. Is there anything in it?
Well, I like young women, let's put it this way. I think most of men do, actually.
Jeffrey would spend his last days as a free man in his Parisian apartment by himself. According to his servants, Jeffrey would just be on the computer all day long.
This is a war against rational behavior.
And Jeffrey was getting so paranoid that he purchased a bulletproof Mercedes and even hired 2 armed guards to stand outside of his apartment. The paranoia was setting in. Now, at this same time, Ghislaine Maxwell was feeling the heat because this immunity that she was granted in 2007, well, that's out the door. So she would meet Prince Andrew in London for a little chit-chat. Were they meeting to get their story straight, or was it a warning about the legal impending disaster about to happen? Who knows? But 5 months from this meeting, Prince Andrew would appear on his infamous BBC interview, to which he admitted to meeting with Ghislaine.
When was your last contact with her?
It was earlier this year, funny enough, in the summer. In the spring, summer.
About what?
She was here doing some rally.
But said that their conversation had nothing to do with Epstein.
And that was the last time?
Yeah, because
Did you discuss Epstein at all then?
No, actually, funnily enough, no, not at all. There wasn't anything to discuss about him because he wasn't in the news. It wasn't, it was just, we'd moved on.
And from that meeting, Ghislaine would be seen less and less in the public's eye. She would dissolve every single one of her corporations and nonprofits, and she would move in with another boyfriend. This may have been an attempt for Ghislaine to just try to live a normal life. Dozens of FBI officers were at the tarmac of Teterboro Airport with a warrant in hand. For the last couple of months, they had been tracking his movements, and they had just received word that Epstein's plane was landing within minutes. As the wheels hit the tarmac, sirens were blaring, guns ablazing, and with no resistance, Jeffrey got out and was placed in the handcuffs. And while he was being driven to jail, his mansion was being raided. And his arrest would be headlined around the world. Justice would finally be served. The victims could have their day in court. As inmate 761804, Jeffrey hated his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. It was cramped, it was dark, infested with cockroaches. He wasn't showering, his hair was a mess. Now, in typical Epstein fashion, he would use his wealth to play by his own rules. He paid numerous lawyers to visit the jail for up to 12 hours a day, giving him the right to meet them in a private room. But outside that meeting room, in general population, it didn't take long for the other inmates to find out how wealthy he was. So Jeffrey would devise a strategy to avoid being preyed upon by the other inmates. He would deposit money into their commissary accounts. Now, Epstein's attorneys claimed that this new indictment was a little more than just buyer's remorse from the government, who had been embarrassed by the plea deal that they gave a decade earlier. And they were convinced that all of this was going to blow over and Jeffrey was going to be a free man. So trying to make life a little easier for Epstein, his attorney submitted a request for him to be on house arrest until his trial. He would pledge his entire $559 million fortune as collateral, just to be on house arrest. We're not even talking bail. And the judge denied it. Jeffrey was found on the floor of his cell with marks around his neck. His cellmate Nicholas yelled for the guards. They cut the bedsheet around his neck and he was transported to the hospital where he was revived, discharged, and sent back to the jail. But now on S-Watch. Jeffrey told the guards that his cellmate had assaulted him the night before. Now, this story is highly doubted by the other inmates and the guards because it was just an excuse to avoid being put on S-Watch and to gain some sympathy from the judge. There's no evidence of that happening. Now, why would he want to avoid S-Watch? You're put in a solitary room, you're naked except for a paper smock, the lights are on 24/7, the place is miserable. Jeffrey would meet with the prison psychologist every day until 6 days later when he was taken off S-Watch. A week later, Epstein signs in his last will and testament. It would bequeath Epstein's assets, everything he had built in his life, to the 1953 trust. And according to the will, Epstein was worth $577 million. His Manhattan mansion, $77 million. His mansion in Paris, $8.6. New Mexico Zorro Ranch, $17 million. Palm Beach mansion, $12 million. And his island, $68 million. Now, like I said earlier, Jeffrey and his superstar team of attorneys had remained very optimistic about this case until August 9th. The lawyers crowded the plastic chairs in the meeting room with Jeffrey. The courts had just released a cache of previously sealed documents proving all of the disturbing details about the accusations against him. Jeffrey was done. Any hope of him getting out was gone. He was going to live the rest of his life in prison. A few hours later on the overnight shift, only 18 guards were watching the jail of 750 inmates. And that night, Epstein's bunkmate was transferred out and placed in the solitary confinement because he had a phone on him. And Jeffrey's last meal would be a baked ziti with the tofu pasta. As the guards were delivering breakfast to all the inmates, they discovered Jeffrey in his cell, unresponsive and blue in the face. He had used the bedsheet around his neck like he had before. The worker hit the alarm, the staff cut the bedsheet and tried to do CPR, but an hour later, he was pronounced dead. It wasn't too long before news had spread all over the world.
Breaking news this hour, officials say multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life.
How could one of the most high-profile prisoners of the last decade commit suicide? The FBI would be called in to get to the bottom of this. Now, Jeffrey's death would trigger a wave of outrage and conspiracy theories. According to one poll, 48% of Americans believe Epstein was murdered. Now, some people speculate that it was the Clinton family or his President Donald Trump. The meme, Epstein didn't kill himself, spread like wildfire across the internet.
And Epstein didn't kill himself.
Now, this is a personal anecdote, but when Jeffrey Epstein first died, I thought he was murdered. I was convinced of it. Everyone was talking about it, the evidence I saw, that was it. Until I did the research for this video for the last 5 months. I truly believe that Epstein killed himself. And I'm gonna state my case. Now, MCC, the jail he was held at, is nicknamed Little Gitmo because the conditions are that bad there. The cells are leaking with human excrements because of the terrible plumbing into the cells. One lawyer said the mice there eat all of his clients' papers. Now, MCC had a staffing problem, a major one. They were so pressed for guards that they would force teachers, nurses, and cooks to step on in. The jail was designed to hold at maximum 480 inmates. It was 750 by the time Jeffrey got there. And there was just 18 guards for the entire place. Now, just to get a sense of how badly run that jail was, it was shut down last month because of all these problems for a total revamp. That's how bad it was. Now, one of the biggest mistakes was the decision of the prison psychologist to end the S-Watch for Epstein after 6 days. According to some forensic psychologists, they say the usual time is about 2 to 3 weeks on S-Watch, not Epstein's 6 days. Now, that night, the guards on his block should have checked Mr. Epstein every 30 minutes, but they stopped at 3:30 a.m. because they fell asleep. The 2 guards watching the entire block were working a 16-hour double shift, and they had falsified the records to make it look like they had checked in on the whole block. So these 2 guards would actually be charged criminally, like months later, for falsifying all of the records. And it came out during the court case that they were often on Facebook, looking at Craigslist ads, and they had it on video of the guards sleeping. Now, the camera is a source of a lot of conspiracies. There is some weird stuff. So they have footage of the cell block row. No one can be seen entering or exiting Jeffrey's cell, but it was the camera facing his cell that was off. Now, the jail first said that they had the footage, and then when it was exported to be used in a court case, the IT staff had recorded the wrong floor. So the footage essentially got erased. So broken or faulty cameras is such a big issue right now within our own prison system that in 2016, the DOJ published a report about all of the deficiencies within the security camera systems in prisons. Hundreds of blind spots, broken cameras, faulty recording systems were found. Now, here's how bad it is. More than 30 prisoners have escaped from lockup across the United States over the last 20 months due to faulty cameras. So there is a bill that was just passed in the Senate, sponsored by John Ossoff, called the Prison Camera Reform Act of 2021 that will upgrade all of the cameras within federal prisons. So what I'm trying to say is that broken cameras is not just a problem here at this jail, but at all jails and prisons across the United States. Now, Epstein's autopsy was conducted by a board-certified pathologist and 30 deputy medical examiners employed by New York. And then on behalf of Mark Epstein and his attorneys, they hired Dr. Michael Baden, the celebrity medical examiner, to watch over the whole thing. So weeks later, the 31 state medical examiners, they had ruled that Epstein's death was by suicide, except for Dr. Michael Baden. He believed that he was murdered. You see, Baden is known as the medical examiner you hire when you want the autopsy to go a certain way. Essentially, this guy is known for being incredibly unreliable. Now, I've linked an article down below going into detail about Dr. Michael Baden's integrity. Now, here's Baden's evidence. Now, doctors state that when you hang yourself, there are certain particular bones that break, and Jeffrey broke those along with this hyoid bone. And that's more consistent with homicidal strangulation. But what Dr. Michael Baden left out was that the thyroid bone often breaks with the self-hanging of older people. Epstein was 66. Now, there are a lot of people who certainly wanted to see Jeffrey Epstein dead. Powerful people. People who might have had evidence tied up in his blackmail scheme. Now, a murder isn't completely out of the realm of possibility. I'm open to the idea. But honestly, I don't think we're ever gonna know. It's ruled a suicide. Technically. So until proven otherwise, that's what it appears to be. Now, for all of the conspiracies about his suspicious death, I'll ask you one question. Does it really change anything? He's dead. We'll never hear him be cross-examined under oath. The victims will never have their day in court. Think about it. Epstein lived a life of luxury, having whatever he wanted, and then being brought into one of the worst run jails in the United States, living in a 50 square foot cell, and then he attempts one time and fails, and then days later he's told he's gonna be there for life. Jeffrey was not murdered. He chose the exit on his own terms. It was the last bit of control he could have over his life. As hard as she tried, Ghislaine could just not escape her past with Epstein. Days after his death, she'd be photographed in Los Angeles eating alone, reading a book at In-N-Out. You see, the whole world was now looking for her, but she was just hiding in plain sight. Now, she knew that the authorities were starting to close in on her, so she would need to lay low. She would purchase a home in a remote city. She wrapped her cell phone in tinfoil, thinking that it would prevent her from being tracked. She would hire ex-British military as her private security, and even registered a new phone number under the name G-Max. And all she wanted was for all of this to go away. Nearly 1 year since Jeffrey's arrest, 25 FBI agents raided Ghislaine Maxwell's compound and took her into custody. She would be placed on S-Watch permanently, kept under surveillance 24/7, or to put it as the Attorney General said, William Barr, we don't want any more F-ups. Now, her arrest would spark a whole other media frenzy over the case.
Now that this Ghislaine Maxwell guy or lady got arrested,
would she cooperate with the prosecutors? Would she reveal the secrets of Epstein? The lawyers representing the victim say she is just as evil as Epstein. And one person would actually defend Ghislaine. Alan Dershowitz. He wrote, "Keep an open mind about Maxwell." Now, since her arrest, she's been denied bail 3 times, even with their $28.5 million proposal, and she pleads not guilty. So her case starts November 29th, 2021. So make sure to have your Thanksgiving leftovers ready. One of the biggest unanswered questions of the Epstein scandal is about the identities of the famous friends alleged to have joined him in abusing women at all of his properties. Epstein's victims never got a chance to find out whether he would rat out his friends, all just to save himself. Now, rumors have circulated that Epstein had hidden cameras at his mansions and used this in a big blackmail scheme. In a 2015 affidavit, Virginia Roberts said she believed that videotapes of her abuse with Epstein and his friends existed. Though we may never really know what evidence exists. Maybe we'll learn from Ghislaine's upcoming trial. Now, Epstein's story doesn't fit into any political narrative neatly. The bad guys are on both sides in this story. Trump is linked to Epstein, and so is former President Bill Clinton. This story has less to do with politics and more to do with class and wealth. Epstein's money and influence protected not just himself, but anyone who was connected to him, which is really the most disturbing example of power perpetuating itself.